David Cay Johnston, everybody.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. I was reading the numbers about trust in America. It was a celebrated poll. I'm sure you saw it, a CBS YouGov poll, I think it was. And it spoke to the faith that in the Republican Party, this is a Republican poll of Republicans, Trump is commanding the 71%, I think is the number. People trusting him more than their family, more than their clergy. I mean, it was really, I thought of you because you talk about the cult, that's associated with Trump. And it's a cult. And so, David, this is my question. Please remark on that. But it gets to a question, which is, how do you handle a political figure in America that's more than a political figure?
Well, it's an interesting challenge for democracy, and it is a challenge. We've seen recently some evangelical pastors saying that their congregants want to be more like Trump and not like the Bible. They don't want to turn the other cheek. They don't want to have love for everyone else. They don't want to do unto others as they want done unto themselves. They want to adopt Trumpian approaches. And I think that's a good sign of what's really been a multi-decade, bit-by-bit breakdown on morality in America. 25 years ago or so, I was writing pieces in the New York Times quoting prominent accounting and tax law professionals as saying that the potential for making enormous amounts of money with sham tax shelters was just causing even some of the biggest firms to abandon their obligations in pursuit of money. And while everybody doesn't have a price, many people do. And if the price gets high enough, it's just like a lottery. Even an unfair lottery will attract people if the payout is big enough. And
that's a great statement. Oh my God, that just is. That's why you're a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Well, there's research about this. And,
I get it, but still, it so frames it, that one statement. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I want to caution that I don't think the polling. I'm very distrustful of polling, partly because John Garaci, who's a pollster where I live, and who wrote a book called Poll-Arised, has warned that political polls aren't terribly reliable because only about 1 in 100 people will answer the questions. And secondly, what we're seeing, if you look a little more deeply into the polling data, and all the legitimate pollsters publish all the questions and the answers, so you can read through them. What they show is that there are a lot of people who will voice support for Trump or say that they oppose prosecuting him, but they don't want him to be president. And, let's remember, Republicans are a minority party. So 71% of Republicans gets you somewhere around 33% of the public. And a lot's going to happen between now and next November with Trump. And, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but some months ago, I said to my family, and I had to make a record of it, that I think it is now possible that Donald will try to flee the jurisdiction if he knows he's going to go to prison. There's no interior there. If he's in prison, he's not Nelson Mandela or Navalny or you or me. There's no moral fiber to support him if he's behind bars. And lo and behold, Donald now made a joke about, I could just flee to Russia and spend my days with Vladimir. When Donald says things like that, he's thinking about them. He is absolutely thinking about them. So I think we should be on the alert for that because, Donald is like almost all bullies. He's a coward inside.
Yeah, I should remind people you've written 3 books that I can think of, but maybe more on Trump. I've read all of them.
3.5.
3.5, okay. And as I think I mentioned last time, I I like to, sometimes when I know you're coming on or whatever, I'll crack them open just to, even though I've read them already, just to read certain stories and parts. And I've told people who watch this show also that you can so enjoy the David Cay Johnston books. You just, again, needle drop them, crack them open anywhere, and there's stories about Trump. But I guess what I'm getting at is when you say something like that, I mean, you know him sort of on a granular level. You just know him so well. So when he says something sarcastically, I did hear him say it, or I read the statement, or maybe I actually heard him say it. Oh, like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to go to Russia or whatever. Because he was speaking about the fact that he had to post a bond, right, David? That's what he was saying. He was making fun of the fact that they had made him post a bond.
That's the context of it. But Donald doesn't have any of the normal controls on what he says. So when Donald tells you that I'd be dating my daughter Ivanka if she wasn't my daughter.
Oh my God.
You know, when he says when his younger daughter was an infant, still in diapers, on Robin Leach's TV program, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and Leach asked Donald and his then still mistress, not yet briefly wife, Marla Maples, well, what do you see of yourselves in the daughter? And Marla said something perfectly reasonable and normal. And then Donald said, well, you know, she's got her mother's legs, and for those of you who aren't watching, I'm putting my hands up to my chest, spread out. But it'll be another 15 years before we find out if she's got her mother's. I mean, who says that about a baby in diapers?
Their baby. I mean,
yeah. And so when Donald says things, because he doesn't have these controls that most of us have for being a civil, polite, decent, he's thinking about it. He is thinking about it.
The Trump indictments, the legal cases as they grind on, they are just a review for us. You feel they will damage him? You sort of alluded in some of what you've just said. You said, well, it's a long time and there's a lot that's going to come out. That sort of implied to me that you feel he may get sort of dirtied up in this process.
Oh, I think that the January 6th trials, Fulton County and Washington, D.C., as evidence comes out, and a lot's going to come out before any witnesses testify, it's going to be very bad for him. People who aren't complete blind Trumpers are going to realize that this wasn't like a one-off where he said things that were unwise on January 6th. This was a months-long scheme. It was a plot to overthrow the government. And I wish the TV networks would stop saying he tried to overturn the results of the election. He was trying to overthrow the government. This was a coup. It was a clownish coup because Donald doesn't have the skill to organize things. But nonetheless, it was a coup attempt. And we're going to see as time goes by what exactly Mark Meadows told federal prosecutors. We know from ABC News that he told them he never heard that Donald issued any kind of blanket order that said, I'm declassifying documents, or any documents I take to the residence or my home are declassified. And Meadows, of course, is not an unindicted co-conspirator in the federal case, but he is an indicted co-conspirator in the Georgia case, which he's trying to get out of. And that tension between the way the two different prosecutors are handling things, a lot's going to come out there. And we'll have at least one of these trials before the November elections, and hopefully before the party nominating conventions next summer.
So this is interesting. That skips ahead in the chat. They're asking, do you think we'll see a trial? So you think we will?
Yes, I think the most likely trial to go first will be the Washington, D.C. January 6th trial. Now, Donald, you'll notice something very significant has happened. Georgia has really tough rules on bail. I mean, this is a legacy of the racist history of the Georgia criminal justice system. But it's much harder to get bail in Georgia than it is in New York. And Donald suddenly has gone pretty close to radio silent in his attacks on witnesses and prosecutors. Once he is booked on Thursday and he has to go to this lousy, awful jail. We shouldn't have jails like this, but we do. and spend several hours there and probably spend some time sitting in a holding cell, whether he's by himself or with others, it's going to really bother him. And he may say some indiscreet things. But the judge in Washington, D.C. has made it very clear that, witness intimidation and interference with the administration of justice will not be tolerated. And her preferred method, she's made very clear, is not to jail him. It's to bring the trial to a closer date, to move it closer to today. Right now it's scheduled for, January 2nd. Trump is got his people out saying, it's 15 million or whatever it is pages of documents, we can't read them all. That's not how that's done. Companies now have developed software for legal research where they put everything into the software and it finds all the key words for you. The government has effectively told Trump's lawyers, here's what's really important. A lot of this is nobody's going to care about 1 million pages of what's in detailed documents. And who are the witnesses in this case? Well, they're going to be Donald Trump against himself because they're going to be able to play videos of things Donald has said. And then secondly, they're going to all be Republicans Donald Trump appointed. There's not going to be a single Democrat. You're not going to see Eric Swalwell or Katie Porter or Adam Schiff. They're not going to be testifying in this trial. It's going to be Republicans testifying.
The questions that come up, David, around some of what you said, here's one. This is a little funky, but if you really thought that Trump would hatch the plan to leave for Russia or anywhere, again, that you have to operate on this premise. Tommy asks, does the Secret Service help him flee the country?
Well, there's a very good question. The Secret Service agents are there to protect the protectee. We've had a president, I think it was George W. Bush, whose daughters were at a party where people were smoking grass, and the older Obama girl was at such a party, though she left right away. And that's no business of the Secret Service agents. They don't, that's not their job. Think of a Law and Order episode where the homicide detectives say to the guy who's terrified to talk to him, listen, we're not the narco squad. We don't care about your drugs. We want to know about this killing.
Okay.
Now, what if he actually was going to flee the jurisdiction? I don't know. And his plane won't fly all the way to Russia, I believe, from what I've read about its range. So he'd have to get somebody to cooperate in refueling. But my point is he's thinking about running away because Donald is a child. I mean, he's he's been stuck his whole life at being 13 years old. Why he treats women the way he does. This is a Groundhog Day as a nightmare, not a comedy. I mean, can you imagine having to spend your whole life trapped in the emotional turmoil of whatever your year of puberty was, 12, 13, 14? I mean, what a horror.
Yeah, but if you have that kind of money and visibility, it may take a little of the edge off the horror. Here's a question about the Trump followers. I like these questions for you also because they speak to the texture of America and how it seems to be changing. David, do you think the Trump followers will get violent again, scared about the crazies bringing out their guns, Karen says?
Yeah, there will be blood before this is over, but it's going to be more lone wolf, very small type things. You're not going to see thousands of people turn out for two reasons. First of all, the government's been incredibly effective in the January 6th prosecutions, now seeking 33 years for one of the Proud Boys, Enrico Tarrio, 18 years already handed out to Elmer Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers. And you got to be pretty stupid and self-destructive to take actions that'll risk long prison terms. You're going to lose your house, your family, whatever. But that doesn't mean there won't be somebody who will say, well, as a protest, I'm going to, with a sniper rifle, take out some cop somewhere. I mean, right after 9/11, there was a Sikh who was killed by a guy in Arizona who said, death to all you Arabs. And of course, Sikhs aren't Arabs. There was a sheriff's deputy who, an anti-tax guy I wrote about, mistakenly thought was from the IRS. I don't know how you mistake his black and white patrol car for an IRS unmarked car, but he shot and killed that deputy as a protest. We had the guy who flew his airplane into the building in Austin, Texas, to protest a section of tax law that isn't in the tax code that I've written about a number of times, that completely backfired, and Congress still hasn't fixed it even after that death. Killed a Vietnam veteran who was a manager of some kind, low-level manager at the IRS. So likely there will be some violence, but there aren't going to be any mass uprisings whatsoever over Trump. That's not going to happen. But
it's interesting to note, David, didn't interrupt, but I was just going to say, just on that point, that his crowds that he calls for in Manhattan, in Florida, in Georgia, they just don't materialize. I mean, I think there's a lot. That's a litmus test of sorts.
Yeah, he got in the Manhattan arraignment. He got about 24 people. Interviews that I've watched on YouTube or news stations or listened to on the radio with some of these people made it clear that they were hoping to see Trump, and they were there with more of a festival atmosphere about this. He got a tiny group of people in other places, and his crowds at his rallies are clearly shrinking. And that's been going on for a long time. So, his support is, as wide as the country and about as deep as the sheet on your bed.
Yeah, it would appear really that it's going that way. But wow, those who believe really believe. The last question I have for you, David Cay Johnston, is about electability. There's just chapter and verse being cranked out about Trump's lack of electability, essentially, how that coalition of whatever it is, of those who are MAGA-ites, that they're just not significant enough in number to make him electable, even against a president who isn't super popular. And that's a different conversation. I'd love to have it about why Biden hasn't been able to message better, or, we seem to respond to superficial stuff, and increasingly it's how many push-ups you can do. It's like high school. But go ahead. Speak to whatever you want, but electability is my question.
Yeah. In any other environment, I think Joe Biden's extraordinary success on the economic front would be helping him a lot. And clearly they're now out trying to pitch that and get people to understand. He's blown away the job growth over everybody else. And even if you discount the recovery from COVID, he still has better job growth than Trump did. On the electability issue, Donald cannot win the popular vote. That doesn't mean he can't get to the White House, because we elect through the Electoral College. And so if he can win Wisconsin and Georgia and Pennsylvania again, if he can win Ohio, it's possible he can get to 270 Electoral College votes. And this is going to be an ongoing problem after Donald Trump for the country, because of the way the Electoral College works. The somewhat more rural states have outsized power. California has 2 senators, so does Wyoming. The population is almost 40 million and less than 600,000. And so this is going to be a long-term problem, but we need to pay real attention to, and we need to think about whether we need to revise our Constitution. But in any event, the concern isn't the popular vote. It is the Electoral College. Secondly, there's going to be a huge turnout of people over the Dobbs decision and subsequent decisions, where it's become very clear that the people who are in the anti-abortion movement are a lot more absolutists, I think, than any of us realized. You got raped and you're 10 years old, tough luck, you got pregnant, God wants you to have that child, we're not going to let you have an abortion. You're not old enough to read a book in the library of your own choosing, but you're old enough to carry your rapist's child. That's brought a lot of people out to vote, mostly women, but plenty of men too. And so I think that augurs against Donald, even though Donald has a much more nuanced position about this. He's not.
Yeah, that's right. But he puts people in place in positions of power, judicial power, who don't have nuanced positions about this.
100%. Because Donald doesn't have any core philosophy except it's all about me, and I'm the only one who's competent or capable.
David, thank you for your time. We'll let you go, but look forward always to your thoughts, and I look forward to next time. David Cay Johnston, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.